Always a pleasure to be joined by ESPN NFL insider Casey Joyner, the football scientist. Going to do some wrap around the NFC East here. Casey, how you doing this afternoon?
Hey, doing good. How are you?
Doing well. So I want to start with specifically the Cowboys situation because, you know, the Cowboys are a team that a lot of people thought was the favorite for the NFC East. And now with Tony Romo out 6 to 10 weeks, you're going to have a rookie quarterback in Dak Prescott. And, you know, we think we know what the Cowboys are getting in Dak Prescott between what we've seen in the preseason, what we saw of him in college. But, Casey, he's still a rookie quarterback, and teams are going to start game planning against him.
Yeah, they are. And the thing is, though, is that the Cowboys a couple years ago, they leaned really heavily on their offensive line and said we're going to run the ball really effectively, and it was able to protect their defense, able to protect Romo so he wouldn't get hurt. So they can do a lot of those same things with Prescott. The thing they need Prescott to do, because they had that same formula last year and it didn't work because none of the quarterbacks they had were able to throw vertical passes. That's passes where you throw them 11 or more yards downfield. Dak Prescott last year ranked 5th in the SEC in total QBR on vertical passes, but he had a 91.3 ranking, which means, roughly speaking, that his performance on vertical passes was in the 91st percentile. You're talking really, really good performance. He was tied for third in vertical passing yards in the SEC, if you're talking against Power 5 teams, and he was only 12 yards away from being ranked second, and he had a 10-2 touchdown-interception ratio. So the guy has shown a history of being able to get it downfield, and if he can do that, the Cowboys formula could still work.
You know, Casey, looking at the Cowboys overall, you know, even without Tony Romo, they still have some pieces around Dak Prescott, from Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield to one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Without Tony Romo, is the NFC East more wide open than ever, or are the Cowboys still considered one of the favorites?
I think that there still has to be a step down. I think Prescott can play better than what the quarterbacks played last year for the Cowboys in Romo's absence, but I mean, that's a relative term. I mean, a lot of people could play better than those quarterbacks. So I think it's still very much more wide open, because when you look at Des Bryant's numbers last year, he had some terrible numbers across the board. It wasn't just on short passes, vertical passes, stretch vertical, you name it. He was doing terrible across the board. And some of that was due to his injury, but some of that was due to the poor quarterback play. So the big question is, in his case, let's say, we know he's not going to be probably at the level that he was when Romo's in his prime, and they're putting up fantastic numbers a couple of years ago, and he's probably going to be better than he was last year. But where does he fall in between? That's a very large spectrum there. Does he fall closer to the bottom or closer to the top? I think he's going to be closer to the top than he was last season, but I still don't know where that's going to put the Cowboys' offense. It's going to be better than they were last year, but it just turns them into one of 4 contenders as opposed to the favorite.
Focusing back over to the Eagles this weekend, we saw the offense have a bit of an explosion, Casey. They came out all guns firing, and you got to see a lot of different things. What did you see from the Eagles offense? We know Sam Bradford went 17 for 20, threw 2 touchdowns, and it seemed like the main guys who were getting the targets were Dorial Green-Beckham, the plays that happened for Josh Huff, and then the tight ends.
Yeah, I love what they were doing with the tight ends. That was, Ertz was 5 for 5. It's all short passes pretty much, but still very good. And they have enough faith in Dorial Green-Beckham to where they make some personnel changes, and they said this is our guy. And that was the big thing: is do you think that Dorial Green-Beckham can play to his talent level? Because you look at his metrics, and last year when he faced a tough cornerback, or good or better cornerback, I should say, he posted 10 yards per attempt. That's a really good number against any cornerback. If you're talking just against that level of competition, it's fantastic. But the idea is, can he do that on a consistent basis? And Philadelphia must think that, yeah, you could do it more consistent than the people we had. So that's great, because the thing is, if Green Beckham can turn out to be the kind of vertical threat they want, and they're getting the production they want out of their tight ends, I mean, then the dominoes start to fall into place. Now you've got the vertical threat, you've got a tight end, you know what you've got in Jordan Matthews. So, I mean, all these other things start to fall into place. But the bad thing is for them is that they still lack depth, and if you see an injury at any of those positions, I think the dominoes don't fall nearly as well.
Also with the Eagles, you got to see a little bit of Josh Huff used as kind of more of a playmaker than a natural receiver, because that's not really his thing. He spent so much time in college being a running back and a kick and punt return guy that he doesn't have a ton of reps at the wide receiver position. And it was interesting to see him be used in sweeps and bubble screens. Do you think that is something that can be consistently used week to week with Huff?
Yeah, you can take a gadget player like that and find a certain role for him and say, okay, like They like Matthews to be the slot receiver. They can have Green Bay can be the vertical guy. They have Ertz be their tight end. They can do a number of things with. They can even flex Ertz out. And now you've got Huff, who can be essentially just a running back on the edge. You can just there's just a perimeter guy out there, and if you can run those bubble screens and things, it adds one more element out there. The thing I'd like to see though is that if he does those things, that's all he can do. Do you then when he goes out there, if he's out there on the bubble screen, now does the defense know, okay, this is all this guy can do? I'd like to have seen them try and find as many ways as they can to incorporate him into the offense, because if you can find 3, 4, 5, 6 different things that he might be able to do given a position he's lined up in, now he's not going to give away what he's doing just where he is, because he's kind of limited in some ways, and you're really going to have to play call around those limitations.
Looking around the NFC East, now that the Cowboys, as you put, took a step down from Romo to Prescott, where does that line up the Eagles, the Redskins, and the Giants in terms of where you think it's all going to fall out? Because in the first 8 to 9 weeks, all these teams play each other.
Yeah, I think Washington has the highest percentage chance of that group, just because I like what they've got. And Cousins does a fantastic job at short passes. He needs to improve on vertical passes, but as long as Jackson's healthy, that's where Washington is. In fact, that's kind of a theme you could say with all these teams, is that if you looked at it, I guess it's probably who's going to stay healthy, because if Washington were to lose to Deshaun Jackson, they'd fall back to not having a vertical pass again like they did last year. Imagine what happened to the Giants offense if Odell Beckham Jr. got hurt. They don't have anybody else who's anywhere near that level. And with Philadelphia, I think they've got probably more a level of depth that the other teams don't have, but they don't have anybody who's at that elite level that the other teams have. So that's kind of a weakness for them. But I'm looking at all these teams going, okay, well, Dallas already showed us that maybe one injury could bring them back down to earth, but I think it's which one of these teams is going to stay healthy, and maybe who can develop an alternate vertical threat, like if the Giants can develop Sterling Shepard into an alternate vertical threat for Beckham. If Beckham does get hurt for a short time, they've got somebody they can go to. So it's kind of going to be how the teams develop the talent that they have, in addition if they stay healthy.
Then my next question is, Casey, is there a team in the NFC East that is better built to sustain if they do have injuries?
Yeah, probably Dallas if as long as they don't get another quarterback injury, because they've got that offensive line. That is their offensive line, and mind you, last year they had less than stellar personnel circumstances. With Romo being hurt, the quarterbacks couldn't do anything vertical downfield. Des Bryant's playing terrible. They had all kinds of things that weren't going well for them. And the opposing teams knew all we have to do is stop the running game. That's all we have to do is stop the running game. And Dallas still was able to place 8th in the league in a metric I have called good blocking rate, which measures how often an offensive line gives its ball carriers quality run blocking. So if in less than stellar circumstances that line could still be top 10, if you can give them anything better than those sorts of circumstances, they could probably reach top 5, top 3, even at the top of the league. So that's the sort of strength that can ameliorate any kind of weaknesses they have across the rest of the team, as long as they can get some sort of passing game going.
We're talking with Casey Joyner, the football scientist, ESPN NFL insider, also writes and covers WWE. You can follow him on Twitter at KCJoynerTFS. Casey, over in Denver, they have a quarterback competition. Apparently, it's been settled. They've named Trevor Siemian the starting quarterback. He's actually going to be the first Northwestern quarterback to start since Otto Graham in the NFL. How crazy is that? But was that much more of a Mark Sanchez losing the job, or Trevor Siemian proving that he can do the job?
I think it has to be more that Sanchez proving that he couldn't do the job. Although it's incredible that you've got a guy like Sanchez who, for all the grief that he's taken over the years, and my son can't see him on the screen. My son's 11 years old, and still every time he sees Mark Sanchez show up on the screen, his butt fumble's the only thing that comes to mind. I don't think he knows his real name. He's got that kind of that's his reputation, and yet when you look at his performance, when you look at his metrics, you look at his numbers, yeah, he makes some mistakes, he makes some really foolish plays, but there are times when Mark Sanchez is a solid quarterback. And when you've got the kind of defense that Denver has, all they're looking for Mark Sanchez was just give us solid quarterback play. That's all we want out of you. You don't have to be great, just be solid. Just, you're going to make a mistake now and again. Fine, we got a defense. We can erase some of those mistakes, but just don't make a bunch of them. And yet, here's Sanchez with no competition presumably around him, or nobody you would think would be able to beat him out for the job, and he can't win the job. So I think it's a matter of because they expected him to play a lot better than that, and I would presume that they don't want to go in Simeon's direction, that they could help it. But then again, they're just looking to raise their quarterback play, which was terrible last year, get it from like bottom quarter of the league to maybe mid-tier of the league. If you can do that, and even if the defense takes a step back, Denver can still repeat. But it's going to, but they had expected more out of Sanchez, and they didn't get it.
You know, Casey, historically, a lot of teams, whether they win the Super Bowl or make it to the Super Bowl, they always seem to have a slump after the season they win. Is Denver possibly going to fall into that same crevice, or do you think they actually can buck the odds?
I would think. I don't know that necessarily they're going to have a lot of times when teams have a drop off, it's because we've won it and now we kind of let up and things. I don't even know that Denver's necessarily going to do that. Their organization sets a pretty good standard that they expect their players to meet over the years, so I think that they'll do that. But it's just a matter of can the defense play as well as it did last year? I mean, they were so good in so many different categories last year, and they've got places they can improve, but I just think that if their pass rush drops off just a bit, if it goes back from being elite to just really good. Well, that's when you're talking the margin of error that they had last year, that might be enough of a margin of error that you don't make it to the Super Bowl, that you make it to the playoffs, and you're out in the divisional round. So I think that they're either going to have, if they don't get a step up at quarterback, then I would expect that team's probably just going to falter back because I just don't expect the defense to play to quite as good of a level as it did last year.
Speaking of the whole situation with the Broncos, the Broncos, the reports are that they're trying to trade Mark Sanchez. They still have to get down to the 75-man mark by 4 p.m. tomorrow. And it seems like with the Cowboys situation with Romo, with the Bears losing Connor Shaw, they need a backup. There's talk that people are very disgruntled with Ryan Nassib with the Giants. You would think that there'd be openings for guys like Sanchez or even Michael Vick, who's still hanging out playing chess, waiting for a job. And it seems like teams are less interested in going to experienced backups than having guys that they cultivate and groom. Is there a reason for that, or do you think it's just a trend we're in?
I think that teams are also trying to see. I would imagine if a team's looking at Mark Sanchez, we'll just use him as an example. I imagine they're looking at it going, well, he was up and down last year. He went to Denver, and Denver couldn't get anything out of him. So if we bring him in, we're asking for a quarterback controversy potentially, depending on what happens. So we'd like to get a good quarterback in there, but man, we really don't want that kind of quarterback controversy. We really don't want the kind of that sort. If Dallas thought about bringing him in, okay, if Romo was back, and let's say Sanchez does play well, then what does that do to Prescott? What does that do to Romo? And now you've got Sanchez there, and it's just bringing you a big headache. And these teams are probably thinking that, look, Sanchez couldn't even hold up to the situation that he's in right now. We'll only make that move if we have to make that move, because we just might be opening a Pandora's box of problems that are really not going to be worth the price we pay.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN, talking with Casey Joyner, the football scientist. Covers the NFL for ESPN, also covers WWE. Casey, I want to ask you before I let you go about the WWE coverage. Now that ESPN is actually doing coverage WWE, not like these little hits they used to do on SportsCenter every once in a blue moon, how much has that changed? How do you think people are perceiving WWE? Has it, do you think, changed a little bit the perception, or is it just more one of the things that WWE is just getting more exposure now?
I think if I had to say it is because the coverage that we're doing, if people haven't checked it out, there's a lot of different stories we're writing about. People from NXT. There's interesting. We just moved Mr. Fuji died. There was an interesting story that was written about him. I've written something about Bob Backlund that should be coming up here pretty soon. We're covering a whole swath of the industry, and the thing is it's not just oversight coverage. We're really trying to get deep dive into interviewing people. I did an interview with Triple H a couple weeks ago. I asked him about 50-50 booking. I asked him about the use of, I called them squash matches. He corrected me and made sure to say they were enhancement matches. We're trying to cover things like that to give people a deeper understanding of the industry. Yes, it's entertainment, they're predetermined finishes, but to give people a better understanding of the entertainment that goes into this, because there's a lot more to this than just what you see on the screen. And we're trying to give people not just what they see on the screen and such, to reacting to the entertainment on the screen, but to say, here's some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. If you want to understand more about the business, we're trying to give you an avenue through which to do that. So I'm really excited about where our coverage has been and where it's going, and I'm looking forward to hopefully penning weekly articles in the WB for ESPN.com in the future.
Very exciting. Casey Joyner, the football scientist, ESPN NFL insider. Casey, appreciate you joining me on the show today, and look forward to talking to you on Thursday.